and welcome to the Men on the Path to Love podcast, the Toxic Masculinity episode. I'm Bill Simpson, your host. I coach men who are struggling in relationship, how to communicate effectively, build trust, and deepen intimacy so that they can be the best version of themselves in relationship and live the life they love. Over the first season of the Men on the Path to Love podcast, I've made several references to the term toxic masculinity in my interviews with James, Aaron, Devon, and marriage counselor Arlene. So what does toxic masculinity mean exactly? Well, here's one definition. Toxic masculinity refers to harmful behaviors, attitudes, and societal expectations traditionally associated with masculinity. It includes beliefs such as the idea that men must be tough, aggressive, dominant, and unemotional, and that these qualities are essential to being, quote-unquote, a real man. Toxic masculinity can lead to harmful behaviors and attitudes towards others and oneself, such as aggression, violence, objectification of women, and suppression of emotions. Sound familiar? Yeah, I was pretty much raised with that perception of masculinity. Although there wasn't a whole lot of, testosterone in my household growing up, my father was pretty passive, actually. Yet he had a strong conservative view of masculinity and homophobia that he would express. And with me being small in stature, I felt like I had to work extra hard to prove my masculinity. I was competitive, I played sports, I especially had to show my toughness in football, and I actually surprised a lot of my teammates. I also played baseball, track and field, from Little League all the way through high school, and then intramural tennis in college. I also played drums in a band, and bought into objectifying girls and women. Looking at porn, going to strip clubs from time to time. And as a DJ and radio personality, I had women offering themselves to me quite often. Not that I always took advantage of it, yet my ego loved it. And looking back, I also realized how I could be controlling in relationship. And I often held my emotional cards close to my chest and all that. So after many years of having this mindset and, relationships that didn't work out and learning from them, going through lots of therapy and studying martial arts, actually, I finally got it. The old way of being what I thought how a man should be wasn't working for me, and I had to change my whole way of looking at my masculinity. I realized that I could keep my masculinity and be vulnerable and show compassion and empathy. Through learning the martial art of Tai Chi and becoming a master instructor, I adopted the concept of yin and yang, creating the balance of the feminine, yin, and the masculine, yang, and in between. And that's something that we all have within us, the feminine and the masculine. And it's not about giving up our masculinity to be feminine. Again, it's about creating a harmonious balance. And with that balance, the potential of having deeper and long-lasting relationships with ourselves and with others. And I have to say, this was eye-opening for me. And now, at this stage in my life, I feel more comfortable in my own skin and who I am for me and in all my relationships. So having my own experience with this toxic masculinity is just part of why I keep bringing up the topic. And another reason is because of the many women I see at the health clinic where I work. I hear them talking about how toxic masculinity has really effed up their relationship with the men that they love and want to be in relationship with, yet their ego and belief system of what it's like to be a real man gets in the way of having a true intimate connection. Now, some examples of toxic masculinity could be a man who believes that he must always be in control and never show vulnerability or weakness, leading him to shut down emotionally and be unable to form close relationships. He may also exhibit aggression towards others, believing that violence is an acceptable way to solve problems. Another example could be a man who, as I mentioned, objectifies women, viewing them as objects for their own pleasure rather than as equal individuals with their own desires and needs. And these harmful beliefs and behaviors can cause real harm to both the individual and those around them. I had a patient at the clinic who I'll call Marie, not her real name. When she came to me, she was full of anxiety and pretty depressed. She told me that she had been married for about 6 years with 2 kids, both girls, 5 and 3. And overall, she had been, relatively happy in her marriage until almost a year prior to coming to me. She said her husband, I'll call him John's behavior started to change. She said that he was spending more time at work and less time at home with the family. And then he started saying stuff like he was the man of the house and it was a long time coming that things had to change. And he began to insist on controlling every aspect of their lives, from how they talked and acted to what they wore and what they watched on TV. Apparently, it was John's belief that as the man of the house, he should be in charge and make all the decisions. Well, Marie, not knowing what to make of this change, pushed back and asserted herself. And John saw this as a threat to his masculinity, and he would react with anger and aggression. He would put her down and tell her that she wasn't being a good wife and mother, and would threaten her physically to keep her in check. Marie told me she started to isolate and she was afraid of John. Her physical, emotional, and mental health began to suffer. She begged John for them to seek counseling and he refused, saying that psychology was bullshit and he didn't want anything to do with it. Well, by that point, Marie felt like she had no choice but to leave. And eventually, she got the courage to file for divorce. It was a very painful and difficult process for her, yet she knew that she couldn't stay in a relationship that was so toxic and damaging. And now, with the help of her therapist and myself, we are helping Marie to heal from the trauma she experienced in that toxic relationship. So this is just one example of what I see a lot in my clinical practice. And it is heartbreaking to witness, and what's really sad is that most of the men who embrace this toxic masculinity mentality don't see it as a problem. And it's really hard to get through to them the cost of how their behavior hurts and impacts others. However, it's not impossible. Take my client Jake, not his real name, and his partner Emily, not her real name. They had been in relationship for just over 2 years when things started to get rocky. Jake was this confident businessman who took a lot of pride in being in control and always being right. And a lot of the times he would dismiss Emily's opinions and feelings, and he would make decisions without consulting her. Well, this took its toll on Emily, and she told Jake that she felt like he didn't respect her as a partner or valued her opinion. She suggested that they get counseling, and Jake pushed back and said that he wasn't into all that. Then Emily drew the line in the sand and said either they get help or she was going to leave. Well, Jake talked to a friend about it, and his friend, a former client of mine, referred Jake to me. He liked the idea of having a coach instead of a therapist, and the fact that I'm a man was more appealing to him. Emily was thrilled about the idea. So Jake took the leap and he came to see me, and I helped him recognize the toxic patterns of his relationship. Him being controlling, always right, and so on. We talked about how to communicate in a way that Emily felt seen and heard, and that what she had to say mattered. Jake said that this was hard for him because he was raised with the belief that the man had to be in control and make all the decisions. When I pointed out that that kind of thinking caused Emily to feel devalued and disconnected, he finally got it and was committed to change. And Jake worked hard. He really did, and he continues to do so. And he said that he still finds himself trying to be in control at times, yet with his trust in Emily's feedback, he continues to make strides to improve himself for himself and the long term of the relationship. That's all we can ask from our partners or spouse, right? Well, Jake and Emily are now engaged to be married in the near future. In this case, Jake was able to see the light, so to speak, which is a beautiful thing. So, men who embrace toxic masculinity can change, but it's hard. Research studies have found that men who stick to traditional masculine norms, including those associated with toxic masculinity, may also experience negative mental health outcomes, such as anxiety, depression, and aggression. This suggests that they may be motivated to change their behaviors and attitudes for their own well-being. I had a patient, a military vet in his late 60s, who went through a health crisis, a heart attack, and triple bypass heart surgery. And that's what took him to finally wake up. He finally got it after years and years of this toxic masculinity. And he was full of regret and continues to make amends to those he hurt, including himself, as a result of his toxic masculinity. With that said, research has also shown that interventions aimed at challenging toxic masculinity can be effective in promoting more positive attitudes and behaviors. Programs that encourage men to express their emotions, challenge gender stereotypes, and programs that promote healthy relationships have shown to be effective in reducing aggression and violent behavior. However, it is important to note that changing deeply ingrained attitudes and behaviors is hard, like I said, and it may take a lot of practice and support. And it's really important to approach the issue of toxic masculinity with sensitivity, empathy, and a commitment to creating a safe and inclusive environment for all individuals. Yeah, it's easy for us to get into our judgment of toxic masculinity, right? Yet, think about it. This attitude has been ingrained in us worldwide for centuries, and we are slowly evolving. And it's not only toxic masculinity, we've said this before, there's toxic femininity, where women buy into this attitude as well, succumbing and conforming that only perpetuates the toxicity. It's my belief that the more men can shift their awareness to a more balance of the masculine and feminine aspects we all have, the more we will have more fulfilling relationships and live the life we love. So spread the word. Here's a quote from a pretty masculine dude, former NFL football player and now actor and HET host, Terry Crews. He says, "Toxic masculinity is a burden to men. It disempowers them, and it impoverishes their relationships with themselves, their partners, and their children." Go ahead, Terry. And on that note, we'll bring to an end this episode of the Men on the Path to Love podcast, the Toxic Masculinity episode. Coming up on the next episode, I'll be talking about a specific stressor that is associated with dissatisfaction in relationships and marriages, increased conflict, and a bigger chance of ending the relationship or divorce. And that's financial stress. Please join me for the money episode next time on the Men on the Path to Love podcast. And remember, if you have any questions or issues about your relationship you need help with, if you have any feedback or comments about the show, please email me at bill@pathways2livingwell.com. That's bill@pathways2livingwell.com. And as always, if you know someone who you think might benefit from listening to this podcast, please share the link and share the love. And until next time, keep your heart open and stay on the path to love.